I will tell you a mystery story called The Case of the Poison Pen Letters, with a very powerful point to it. The Case of the Poison Pen Letters. The place is England. The specific location is a small, pretty little English village out in the countryside. Pretty little place with the usual little small shops down the main street, surrounded by the small farms and fields and homes of the people living in the English countryside. One day, one of the shopkeepers in town got a letter in the afternoon mail delivery, and he took it in his hands as the postman gave it to him, looked it over, and he noticed, first of all, that there was no return address on it. But he opened it, since it was addressed to him, and was a little startled and puzzled when he first glanced at the letter, because the writing was somewhat scrawled as if the individual was trying to disguise his or her writing. But it was the contents of the letter that made him so curious. And the contents was as follows. The shopkeeper was accused of having robbed a bank in London some 5 or 6 years earlier. And the letter simply stated, "I know that you are a bank robber who escaped from the police. And I know that pretty soon evidence will come out to prove that you robbed that bank." And of course the letter was unsigned, being a poison pen letter. So the man called his wife over and he said, "Look what I've got. A crank letter. A poison pen fiend is at work." And his wife looked at it, handed it back to him, and he said, "Well, you take care of the shop, dear, for a little bit. I'm going down to the police station, get it over with, give him the letter." So he went down to the police station, which was a small one for a small town, but there were 2 or 3 officers in charge, and he went up and talked to one of them, handed the letter to him, and just explained that he just got it a short time ago. And the shopkeeper, of course, denied that he was the bank robber that the letter had accused him of being. So the policeman said, "Fine, thank you, sir, you did the right thing in bringing it to us. Just rest easy, we'll investigate it and find out what it's all about." So the shopkeeper went home. 2 or 3 days later, a salesman who lived a short distance out of town went to his mailbox, got a letter, noticed that it was unsigned, and it was the same kind of letter as the shopkeeper had received, and it accused him of embezzling money from a former company that he had worked for years ago. And the letter said, "You are an embezzler and you are about to be exposed as one. I have the facts, I know all about you." And the letter was unsigned. The salesman took the letter to the police station, explained that he just received it, and of course he denied having embezzled money from a former company. And the policeman again assured him, "Fine, you did just the right thing, sir, in bringing us the letter. We'll take it from here on out." The salesman went home. 3 or 4 more days. Even a little farther out of the village, a single woman lived, a little cottage, pretty little cottage out there. And she was a government worker. She worked for a government office in another town at some distance. And she opened her mail, and she saw a letter, poison pen letter, and this one accused her of treason to her country. And the letter spelled out that at one time she had had a romance with a foreign officer, an employee of a foreign power, and she had sold her country's secrets to this foreign country for payment too. And the letter said, "You will shortly be accused of this crime and you'll be exposed." She took the letter into the police station, claimed innocence of the charge. They said, "Thank you, we're getting used to this, we're getting several of these letters. Go home and rest and leave it in our hands." So the single lady went home. Of course, by this time the police understood that they had a definite case on their hand, more than just one little crank letter, which many people get. So the officer in charge looked at all 3 letters, studied them, see if he could find any clues in them, wondering if there's going to be any more letters. And for a while, there weren't any. No more letters were brought in. And he thought, well, that's the end of the case, I suppose. We'll have to work on what we have and see what we can find. So a week went by, no more letters. Then they started again. 4th letter came in, 5th letter. People scattered all over in the village there brought in the same kind of letter, accusing them of a different crime. Until a total of 12 poison pen letters were in the hands of the police, and all of the 12 claiming innocence of the various charges in the letters. So the chief officer at the police station now had 12 letters, so he sat down and looked them over, trying to make some sense out of them, see if he could find who had been sending them. And first he tried looking at the handwriting. Perhaps he could compare it with someone in town who was known to be vicious enough to write letters like that. But the writer of the letters was pretty cunning. He or she had oftentimes used clippings from newspapers to spell out words and had obviously disguised the handwriting in several ways. So the handwriting was out as a clue. The second clue that he thought might have a possibility was the fact that all 12 of the letters were sent from a distant town over on the seacoast of England. Noticing that, he said, well, it might be a clue or it might not be. The person writing them could have lived right here or lived some other place or could live in this seacoast city itself. It's no clue in itself. Maybe just an attempt to mislead us. So that as a clue was out. Then he began thinking of the people in town itself, and he wondered who might have a grudge against someone else or a grudge against the whole town that he might write these letters, but he couldn't uncover anything definite on that. The 12, for example, hadn't served on a jury together where the criminal might have been someone they had convicted. No lead there, no clues. So the local policeman understood in his own mind that he had gone as far as he could with the limited resources of the small police station that he manned. So he thought they'd better contact New Scotland Yard in London for some help. And as he thought about it, he remembered a friend of his that he had been a patrolman with years before out on the streets of London, who is now a very special kind of investigator, a specialist detective. And what this specialist detective did was to use psychology to catch criminals. That is, he was a mind detective. He understood the human mind. If a group of suspects was brought in, he could eliminate half of them at once by understanding that that type of personality wouldn't commit that type of crime. So the local policeman made contact with the mind detective and asked him if he could be released, loaned out to the local police station for a while in order to solve this baffling case. So it was arranged with Scotland Yard that he should come out and take over. So the mind detective came on out and the two friends greeted each other. And the London detective was given a desk back in the police station, big table. And he went on back there, and the first thing he did was spread all the present available evidence out on the desk. Very leisurely but very alertly, he looked at the letters, studied them. He made phone calls, wrote some notes to his superiors back at Scotland Yard for additional equipment. Then he wandered around town. He talked to people. He talked to all 12 of the receivers of the poison pen letters. Asked them to come in, had a little chat with them about the various facts. After studying the case quite thoroughly and using his knowledge of human nature very astutely, he finally told the head of the local police station, he said, I know who sent that poison pen letter, who sent all of the poison pen letters. So if you will do the following, I can close the case for you tonight. What I'd like you to do, if you would, contact all 12 of the people who received letters and ask them to be here tonight, and we can close the case. So the head of the local office said fine, and he contacted all 12 people, asked them to be at the police station that night at 7 o'clock. They all showed up, and they had arranged a little larger room than normal for the final act in the drama of the poison pen letters. There are chairs set up in sort of an auditorium, as an auditorium, with chairs in the middle and a desk in front, and 2 or 3 uniformed policemen standing around the room. And the London detective, the mental detective, stood up in front and talked to the 12 people. And he reviewed the case. And he started with the shopkeeper who had been accused of bank robbery some years earlier. He said, you received a letter. You brought the letter in and declared your innocence. Then he went on to the salesman who had been accused of his crime. And then he finally got to the single lady who worked for the government. And he said, Miss, I know why you sent all those dreadful 12 poison pen letters. I know that you sent them, and I know why you sent them. And the lady jerked upright in her chair a little bit, and her face became hard and angry as the detective went on. He said, after studying the minds and the psychology of all 12 of you here, and then investigating beyond that to your past activities, I know, miss, that you sent all those letters, and I know why you sent them. And her face got harder and angrier, and it was evident to everyone in the room from her trapped look that she was indeed guilty of sending the poison pen letters to everyone, including herself. And the mind detective went on, he said, you see, the case was solved as it now is because I understand how the human mind works. I know, miss, that in a very short time you are going to be accused of treason. Evidence will come up, just as it said in your letter to yourself. Evidence will come up that proves that you betrayed your country several years ago, that you committed treason against your country. And the reason you sent all these 12 letters, including one with yourself, was for one great purpose which you hoped would clear you eventually. Your purpose was to cause confusion. If you could accuse yourself at the very start, and then when you were actually confused, you could bring fog into the situation and say, look, I've been accused all along with these innocent people, and I know what your psychology was in doing that. You wanted to mix guilt with innocence in order to confuse the fact that you yourself were guilty of the crime. You wanted to put yourself in the safest position as you could think of how to do it. So the lady stood up, walked out of the room, followed, of course, by a couple of uniformed policemen, and the case was closed. I've given you a short story that explains 99% of the problems in life, which is the tendency, the habit, the wish of human beings to cause confusion in order to call themselves innocent right in it. Look, listen to this following thought. It's very profound. If a person can keep his own mind confused, keep confusion going out in that world, then he won't have to be clear, will he? Now follow. If there is confusion, then there can't be clearness. Because if there is clearness, what will be revealed in that clearness? You know what will be revealed. The fact that human beings are criminals inwardly to one degree or another. Do you know, right in the human heart is a desperate need to cause confusion, as that lady did with the poison pen letters, because as long as that is there, they don't have to face their own guilt, the guilt of saying that they know more than the light. Are you following that thought? How profound, how immense it is? Therefore, we have found that to deliberately cause chaos means the whole situation, the whole world situation is obscure, and we, if we're still sick, can blame someone else and hope that in the confusion we can get away with it. Do you know what we forget? Do you know what a mind like that forgets? Maybe you're ahead of me. Let's see if you are. A confused mind is already suffering from its own confusion. Only a mind that says, I'm going to start to be clear, I'm going to see my guilt in being egotistical, my guilt in pretending I know. That's the beginning of clearness, isn't it? We're trying to be clear and see what the situation is actually like, face it so that the light will banish the darkness in it. From now on, you have a new exercise for yourself, don't you? You have an exercise in which you can see how petty lies, for example, petty evasions, for example, are a part of your attempt to create fog out into the world so you can hide yourself in it and hope that your defects and your dishonesties are also hidden in the fog. And I'll repeat the point. The reason it can't work is because if you create the fog, you have to walk in it. And you're going to get bumped into, and you're going to bump into other people, which explains wars, which explains heartaches in the home, which explains internal struggles, internal conflict. What a brave mind it is that starts to say, I understand my own tendency to want to confuse things so I don't have to face myself. Do it tonight. Start tonight, no matter how painful it is. You're already in pain. This is a new element, the shock of seeing your pain. You were already in pain by being lost, separated from your real nature, so you're already in pain. Add to that the shock of seeing the pain, and it will begin to disappear. It's a terrible thing for any of us to wander through this world feeling guilty. And there's a good deal more to that, which I'll touch on very briefly, then go on. Even a sense of guilt is a false identity. You pile that onto yourself so you can call yourself guilty and then pray that God will save you or whatever. But beyond that, wouldn't it be nice to be innocent because we're not claiming anything for ourselves, not taking any kind of a credit, not taking even any kind of a blame? That's why you're innocent, because you don't even have a label of calling yourself a troublemaker. That comes later. The first step is to see that you're in trouble with yourself, therefore a troublemaker wherever you go, and you finally take the next step of going beyond the label because you're willing to give up completely, as we talked about earlier, and all your old identity vanishes and you stand there innocent. Not innocent in your old nature. That can never be innocent. It is always guilty because it's separate from God. But an innocence that is not intellectual. An innocence that doesn't have to prove itself. Of an innocence that doesn't even think about its innocence. That's how innocent it is. And that is nothing more but the pure innocence of truth itself that you are now living in. Please.
You were saying that it's only our ideas that we're lost. It's why we're lost.
Is what?
Why we are lost. It's only our ideas.
No, you've identified with your ideas. You even say, I'm desperate and I'm lost. Please save me. That is creating your own lostness by thinking that you're someone who can be lost. You can't even be lost. Do you understand that? I don't know how I could put it any simpler. I'm going to read some inspiring facts for self-help. We have time, don't we? And these will be available tomorrow morning. Inspiring Facts for Self-Help by Vernon Howard. When looking at someone, have you ever suspected that there is another person hiding behind the person you see out front? Your suspicion is correct. You lose nothing when you lose your reputation, for you are not your reputation. 3. Hell consists of being a wrong person who angrily and hatefully tries to prove that he is a right person. This will become clearer as you imagine a man frantically trying to prove to others that nighttime is daytime. 4. I have your sarcasm. Now please give me your intelligent helpfulness. 5. If you really understand human nature, you also understand how and why everything happens on earth. A deluded mind takes the repetition of time events as the eternal state. Think about that. 8. Self-centered sociality is enmity against God and man. You remember that, you butterfly ladies? Both self-forgiveness and other forgiveness, you butterfly men, both forgiveness and other forgiveness occur when the offense is recalled by pure memory, which contains no egotistical self. Innocence exists when the imaginary self does not visit memory. The most heartless fiend on earth is named aggressive ignorance. When you really know where you are, there's nothing to do but to calmly be where you are. Listen to this one. Only a cursor can be cursed. If you can't help but be a generally gloomy human being, here is something you might find hard to believe. The day can come when you can't help but be a pleasant and nice and cheerful human being. Believing in your invented identity is the same as believing in your defeat. What the world has done to you, truth can undo. A man who loves truth more than he loves a woman truly loves that woman, and that woman will love him. It is impossible for weakness to have conscience or consideration toward others. You care for others in the right way when you no longer care for yourself in the wrong way. Spiritual sickness feels like health to the unhealthy. First, sense the inability of human personality to make things right, after which you will sense the existence of a non-human power whose very nature is rightness. Be a truth sleuth. Why do you find it necessary to angrily deny that Vernon knows the truth? You are not required to act in any way that sacrifices your wish to grow in spiritual strength. For example, you are not required to support the weakness of another person. Also, you are not required to relieve the anxiety of anyone whose anxiety is caused by his preference for delusion over reality. Evil can be described as ignorance of the need to develop inwardly. Life victory arrives by desiring spiritual answers more than you desire exterior results. The most sickening self-feeling of all, the self-feeling of self-sympathy. Time thinking imposes its own false meaning onto life, injuring the time thinker. He dares spiritual things you don't. That's why he gets spiritual things you don't. Any man who tells you to reject present self-investigation in favor of a future spiritual or political heaven is living in his present hell. If you don't believe this, tell this fact to such a man. Watch him break down into confusion and anger, which is his present hell. The one thing for which people will never forgive you is to tell them the truth about themselves. You have risen above mere words when you see no difference between the phrases of self-reliance and heavenly reliance. If you can't understand a spiritual truth, you can at least be decent enough not to make a hostile remark toward it. All of society lives from an endless deceptive practice. That practice is to perform the unnecessary and the harmful while trying to make them look like the necessary and the beneficial. You will be aware when your wish to be aware is stronger than your wish to be unaware. Fighting inner darkness in the wrong way is the same as submitting to it. We will show you how to truly fight for life, for light. When you are afraid, which you are, that doesn't mean that your fear, your tension, and anxiety has to go beyond it, go beyond itself and explode into other self-injuring emotions. For example, if you are afraid of someone, of a condition, it is not necessary for you to then go on to be hostile toward it. You need not go on to attack it. Because if you do that, then the attack and the hostility will find a third element to attach itself to, accusation or whatever. And it starts the whole string of freight cars rolling down the track, all unnecessarily. And down a track, by the way, that leads downhill and always, and you know it, to a crash, to a self-crash. Now, what's the alternative? Can't you just sit down somewhere when you're afraid of something and just sit back and know that you're afraid and not go beyond it? Not go and say, what a thrill I have in fearing that person. That event that's going to come up 3 days from now, which I can't get my mind off of, that event that's so scary, so threatening is going to come up in 3 days. And you think of all the plans you're going to have for combating it, for winning. And notice how it drives you crazy thinking about all the future plans you're going to have to combat that thing. You are in fear for just one cause, because you don't really know who you are. Having a wrong self-identification of yourself, 10,000 of them, you're a person who should win, you're a person who should be treated nicer, you're a person who shouldn't be attacked by all these enemies. You have all these ideas about yourself, and now you have to set up the protections 3 days from now when this crisis is going to come up. You're wasting your time. You're trying to win, and your very process of trying to win, you're going to lose. You've already lost. You lose the very second you start thinking in the future of 3 days, I'm going to have just the right program to protect myself and to win. You've lost. How can you find out that you've lost? The easiest evidence in the world. Let me tell you what it is to be lost. It's to be afraid. Aren't you lost when you're afraid? When you're sensitive that something is going to come along and attack you, take away this or that from you? Aren't you lost? The truth, the beautiful, pure, powerful, marvelous truth itself can't be lost. It's always one with itself. It is always found itself. It can't lose itself. There's no division. There's no parts to wander off. There's no false hopes in truth to take it off and say in 3 days, if I build up enough plans and schemes and get enough allies, I'll be all right. Truth doesn't think like that. Can you get it through your heads tonight, starting right now, that there is an intelligence with a capital I that has nothing in common with the way you now think. Come on now. I want you to think how you now think. Look at the madness of it. Look at the scheming, and look at the defense, and look at the hardness, and look at the bitterness, and look at the changed facial expressions as you try to promote and protect yourself. This is what your mind is like. This is what your life is like. And this, horribly, is what you take as the whole world of existence for you. And of course, what else can you do? Your mind can't go beyond itself. How can it? It's limited. You have limited with your self-limiting self-descriptions. And so you look around at the world and you say, I must be normal because I'm angry all the time and so is my boss. I must be normal because my father is always scheming to make a lot of money and doing dishonest little things to get money from other people, and I do the same thing. I must be perfectly normal. May heaven help you for keeping in tune with this world. And heaven had better help you, because you can't help yourself, and you never have, and you never will the way you're doing. So now you know what your present life is like, how it rotates, and you come right back to where you started every day, and all you ever have is a new fresh set of despairs of how you are going to win. Will you listen to me when I tell you the way you are going, you are never going to win, you're always going to lose? There's no way on earth that you can win the way you're now doing it. Tonight, the rest of these meetings, we'll show you how to really win, which is simply to stop trying to. And when you do that, your nature will change, your mind will change, your spirit will change. And then you'll see to your great relief that there actually was an intelligence that was 100% different from yours. See, now, you can't think above your own level. You can't rise above it. Whatever level you take is the top of the world. There's no way you can see above it. What we're trying to do here, and what you can do personally, is to break the barriers of ordinary, limited thinking. And there's one way to do that. You listen to what you're going to hear now. Your future depends on it. Your right future depends on it. The way to break the barrier and leap out beyond ordinary, dull, repetitious thinking is to see that what you call your name, yourself, and your ordinary thinking and feeling are exactly the same thing. Whenever you think incorrectly, you draw yourself into it through your memories, through your imagination, through your ambitions, through your bitterness, through all wrong emotions. And you don't know, you're not even aware yet of where you're going wrong. You don't know that this extremely limited world of your intellect is the cause of all your difficulties in life. The cause of every tension you have, of every hardness, of every defense. And if you have defense, you'll also have offense, and you'll hurt other people as you've already hurt yourself. You don't understand that you must, if you're really going to be free, if you're really going to be happy, if you're really going to be in another world while you're right here in this social world, then you have to come to an end of yourself, which is the same thing as coming to an end of ordinary thinking. Now look, I said you have to come to an end to ordinary thinking, but this is meaningless to you, because you take ordinary thinking as the whole business, the whole world, the whole show. And I know what a problem you have. I know it's how impossible it is for thinking, for ideas to rise above itself to where there's simply a knowledge with a capital K, an insight with a capital I, to where it can look down, this insight, this higher thinking, can look down and see ordinary thought operating, can look down and see it, and then make clearance and make correction. Isn't it evident to you at this point that you cannot correct your own life? How old are you? You know how old you are. You haven't corrected your life up to this point. And moreover, you haven't the slightest idea about how to go about it. What you're hearing tonight is a million miles above your ordinary mind. And the way you can understand what we're trying to get at is to sit back, take in all these impressions, see how true everything is that we're talking about, see that you are being described exactly as you are, collect knowledge, begin to see and understand what I've already said 2 or 3 times, that you're living now in a very limited world which you take as the whole world, and you're trying to find rescue for yourself inside that world when it's a prison. Can you imagine a prisoner in jail? Can you imagine him looking around for a nice, pretty green field, open field outside there, trying to find it inside his prison cell? Can you imagine that same prisoner going down to the exercise yard out there and trying to find a beautiful ocean to look at, the freedom to look out for 100 miles out to the sea? You'd think there was something wrong with his mind, wouldn't you? And indeed there would be. All the people on earth are doing this precise thing. They're looking inside their own thoughts, and because they can't find the beautiful freedom that they've heard about somewhere, because they can't find it, and they don't know what to do to find it, they don't know how to break out of prison. Let me tell you the tragic thing they do, which all of us do at the start, and which you can start to undo. You have to start destroying the delusions that have become so hardened inside you, so that you take delusion for reality. What you have to do is simply see that there's no reality when you imagine an ocean inside the prison. Well, you tell me. You look through your eyes of imagination while in prison, and you say, that is freedom. I can see the beautiful fields, I can see the ocean out there. I can even feel the beautiful breeze, the salty breeze coming in from the sea. All imagination. All right. I challenge you to walk out the gates of that prison. You'll never do it, which proves that the ocean and the flowers that you saw inside of it came from your imaginary mind. You try to pick one of those flowers and enjoy it close up. You try to see a ship on that sea way out there, you'll never see it. There's a point where your imagination breaks down and you're thrown back to knowing right exactly where you are, and it drives you crazy and you don't know what to do, so you invent another forest. You men invent another girl, and you women invent another man, a wealthy man who's going to save you from all that. So your mind repeats over and over, and everything happens inside the prison. What an encouraging bit of information you have just been given. You have been told that it is possible for you to know that you're in prison. You've been told that it's possible for you to understand exactly where you are, admit it, don't lie about it, don't go into the 50th imagination or the 1000th imagination, but know exactly where you are, that you're a prisoner, and when you do that, there is someone on the outside of that prison who has the key, who senses that when you want to get out, you will get out, and he will open the door. that entity outside the prison that is waiting for you to admit that you're in it can be called God. You can call it cosmic consciousness. You can call it supreme intelligence. You can call it spiritual maturity. But something will come to your rescue when you cease going from cell to cell, from one level to another level, saying, I'm on my way out. If you are out, how come you're such a crab in ordinary life? And you know what that word means, to be crabby, to be irritable. Someday, and maybe very soon, I think I shall give a talk called The Great Sin of Being an Unpleasant Human Being. Not very many people would take such a mild word as unpleasantness as being a sin, would they? They think, it's so common. We all have our little irritations. We're all a little bit unpleasant here and there, now and then. What kind of a man, what kind of a woman are you that you would stand there and you would say that to be an unpleasant human being to another human being is okay, that it's acceptable? Do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're saying? That it's all right to hurt someone else? Do you know what you're doing against yourself in being an unpleasant person to be around? Well, of course, I understand perfectly that you're not able, in your present mental condition, of being anything but unpleasant. Because, you see, you didn't understand what I started off with this evening, in which I said, if you're afraid, you need not go off into other negativities. And I will now add, you need not go off into the darkness from your fear of being unpleasant to other people. Oh, I see. Moral codes, you're told to be pleasant. Your mama told you that. The Sunday school teacher told you to be pleasant. And in school you're told to be decent and cooperative to other people. How come you've never been able to do it? I'll tell you why. Because it's very, very difficult. No, it is completely impossible for a savage tiger to be gentle with a lamb. It's not his nature. Don't ask a tiger to be gentle. Don't ask a wolf to stop clawing out at the sheep in the pasture. You're foolish to do that. If you don't want the animals to get at the sheep, there's one way you can do it, which is to chase the wolf away, or to chase the tiger away, to get rid of them in your area. And this is what we're talking about. Oh, you should be so grateful for coming here tonight. You're going to be so relieved, because now, from now on, you can stop trying to do the impossible, which is driving you mad. And you know it. You know the state of your mind, of your life, of your heart, don't you? Oh, what a relief. I can sit back and know what my nature is like. I can't change it. You can't change it. You never have. You put on a bluff and a lot of smiles and a lot of exterior pleasantries. And all the time you were smiling at the world and pretending that you were so nice. The tiger inside you was clawing at you and giving you headaches and sleepless nights and making you feel vicious, trying to find a victim for yourself since you feel like a victim yourself. I want to tell you in simple fact that what you can't do now for yourself will happen very spontaneously to repeat, if you know that you're inside the prison and you don't have the key, which you don't have, you don't have the key. All you have is a prison mentality. All you have is emotional habits that are delighted to be with the other prisoners, especially when you can fight with them. Without having those other people to fight with, you wouldn't know what to do with yourself. And if some of the other prisoners out there don't want to fight with you, you look inside and there's plenty of them inside you that you can go at and who will go at you. Don't you know your emotional prison inside in which there's a riot going on all the time? And you despair over it and you say, what can I do about it? There's nothing that you, as you presently conceive yourself, can do about it. And you resist that and you fight it. You've been doing it for 30, 40, 60, 70 years. That's why you're still in prison. You won't listen to the counsel, to the advice that says, give up your efforts to set yourself free, because every time you do, you bind yourself even more with the thoughts, with chain thoughts. Oh, what a leap you're going to have to take. What a fearful at first jump you're going to have to make. Leaving everything in back of you. And that simply means to know that, listen to what that means. It means for you to know that you're a defeated human being. That all you know is to be cruel. 99% of it covered up, huh? It just breaks out every once in a while when you can't contain it, when it's too strong for you. And then you're ashamed of yourself afterward. And you go right back to being cruel to yourself again. I am telling you that there is a force that you know nothing about. There is a power, there's a higher source that you can't think about and you mustn't try to think about. What you must do is to see that you are not your own creator. You think that now. You not only think that, but you think that you must be your recreator. That you must recreate your identity with many variations of it throughout the week and the month. What you must do is recreate various dramatic roles for yourself. One of the roles being, can you imagine the following being a role? You have the role of yourself being a terrified, lost human being. I am telling you that is a role. And if you gave up your role of being a lost human being, you would no longer be lost. Let me say that one again. If you gave up your mental picture that you have of being a lost human being, you would find yourself. But what you lost would stay lost, and what you find will be new. There'll be no element of your old nature in it. There'll be nothing of your memories in it, of all your clingings and your yearnings and your hateful thoughts. There'll be nothing of that in it. Are you willing then to admit to yourself, never mind talking to other people just now, are you willing to admit to yourself that you just don't know what it's all about, in spite of all the meetings you've come to and the books you've read and the religious instruction you've had? Can you admit that you've been one big fake, one big phony all your life? I have told you, and you listen to this, I have told you, when you say, I am an utter fake, when you say that, somewhere up there, an angel hears that. An angel hears it and passes the message on down, says, that man, that woman is ready. If you're going to give up yourself, and say, I can't do anything more, do you see what happens? Look, If you are not going to live your own life the way you have lived it in the past, who then is responsible for your life? Aren't you overpowered by this? Who is responsible for keeping your life going if you have given up your egotistical strivings? Let me tell you, we're getting close to God. God is getting close to us. Because, please, do you really still think that you created yourself? Do you really still think that you keep yourself going? You, in your conceit, do you think that you have to keep your life going left and right? You now think so? You say, I'd better choose right. If I choose the wrong course, something bad will happen to me. Who are you talking about? This self-invented creature that goes around in misery. Don't get away from the point. I'm not going to let you lose it. I'm going to come back and hit you with it again. A beautiful blow. The blow is this. If you give up, if you no longer want to live your old painful life, and you understand perhaps that's a prayer, if you give up trying to support yourself, if you give up, who will take over? Truth, Spirit, God. Now, listen. There is no question of you trusting or not trusting God to take over your life if you cease to live it in your old wrong ways. Never a question of trust, because thought, idea, so-called faith cannot trust. See, it can only trust its own wrongness. That's what it trusts. So you come to the question, how do I know you're telling me the truth? If you just said, if I can't trust God, if idea can't reach God, then how am I going to have a guarantee that God is going to catch me if I fall and refuse to support myself? See what you did? You brought thought, idea into it again, and you think that God is going to rescue your old nature, and that trick will not work. You might as well give up right tonight, Friday night. You might as well give up trying to trick yourself and confuse God, because it just won't work. So if you give up, not knowing the future of what's going to happen to you, you cancel time and you cancel yourself, and you are saved. Right now. Having let yourself go, you let go of the opposites of time, of yesterday and tomorrow. There's nothing to cling to, nothing to hope for. You just let yourself go, and at that moment, you will know for the first time in your life, the existence of God Himself. You didn't know it before that. All you had was thoughts and ideas and hopes that the God you'd created in your imagination would conform to your wishes and your prayers. It didn't work, did it? You couldn't twist God, could you? In the first place, you weren't twisting God. You're twisting your imaginary God and all your dark thoughts, thinking that you can get away with it, and you never have and never will. I will tell you as a fact, which you have not experienced yet, but which you can experience, each man and each woman personally in this room and listening to this talk. I will tell you that each one of you can experience personally the full fear must come first, the full fear of saying, I can do no more, I give up. And at that moment you think that you're going to disappear. And lo and behold, what disappears is your fear, which was your old nature. What disappears is your anger, which was your old nature. What vanishes is all these heavy, hard, pressing down emotions that were a part of your life for all these years. They disappear. And what takes its place is something that is new, something that is unnameable. Don't go into labels about it. You can go into labels about it after you understand it. And then you put labels on it for the purpose of communication. But that's not the main point. The main point is, when you have let yourself go, when you have just let yourself fall, you will know from yourself that God, truth, reality will catch you and keep you from falling and hurting yourself. Because now your spirit is where it belongs. And where it belongs is home, this higher home. There was once a middle-aged couple. They were at least 30 years old, who lived by a certain definite philosophy. And this definite philosophy was to please other people. And the reason they wanted to please other people is so that other people would be pleased with them. And so one of the ways in which they lived out their philosophy of pleasing other people was to join clubs, organizations, institutions, groups, committees. So they would get in the mail an invitation for a committee or group or club of some kind to join, and they would join it. Or they'd be out in the social world and someone would invite them to join their club, and they would want to please the person who made the offer of the club, and they would join the club. And of course it cost them money, varying from a few dollars to a whole lot of money. But one thing they always got when they joined a club was a certificate. And of course the certificate was always very flattering, with their name personally handwritten in. Mr. and Mrs. Gullible are members of the so-and-so club. So over the months and the years of living by their philosophy of pleasing other people so that they would be pleased with them, they started to collect lots of certificates and diplomas and pieces of paper to hang on the wall. And at first it was very nice. The first one they ever received, they took it and they looked at it proudly and they say, we're somebody. And they put it up on the wall of their living room with a thumbtack. And of course they were very pleased when guests and strangers came in, that the guest would be attracted to it and walk over and nod their head. Yes, they certainly are somebody. They belong to this club. The urge to please other people continued so long and so hard that after a while they had 5 certificates on the wall, 10 certificates. More weeks they had 20 certificates. They had to order thumbtacks at wholesale. Pretty soon they noticed something rather peculiar. One entire wall of their living room was covered with certificates. Blue certificates, red certificates, chartreuse certificates, large certificates, small certificates. And a certain sense of horror began to creep over them as the certificates began to creep over their walls. Finally, it came to the point that all 4 walls of their living room was covered with certificates and diplomas. But the worst was yet to come. As they joined more clubs and paid more money and tried to please more people, the certificates began to creep over their windows, till it finally came to the point where no sunlight could ever creep into their living room again. They found themselves in darkness during the day when the sun was shining cheerfully out there. They were in darkness in their living room because the certificates covered all their windows. And they wondered what was going on. And they thought, we don't know what to do, because when someone asks us to join a club, by our philosophy, we're supposed to please them and join the club, right? But look what this clubbing has done to us. It's blocked out the sunshine in our life when we stumble over the furniture in our own living room. We want to please people, but look what it does. And they were in great internal conflict. Didn't know what to do. So they got an idea in their mind. Maybe in the phone book they could find a club that would help them to not join clubs anymore. Maybe it could get them over their neurosis of club joining. So they looked under clubs, but they found no such thing. And the certificates kept coming in. Now they're doubled over each other. Finally, the husband got the idea. What's the opposite of organization? The opposite of a group of people is a single individual. Maybe we looked in the wrong place in the phone book. So they scurried back to the phone book, using light, of course, turn on electric light. And they looked under individual, and sure enough, there was a business insertion there. It said individual for removing light blocking certificates. Exactly what we wanted, they said to themselves jubilantly, and also happily. So they made a phone call, and the individual answered the telephone, and they told him his problem. He said, exactly why I advertise. You're just the kind of people I need to reach, and you need me. I'll be right over. So he came on over, and they led him into the living room, and he looked around and almost fainted. And he said, turn on the lights, please, I can't see. Your certificates are blocking the window light. They turned on the light, and he wandered around, and he said, I wonder if you've ever classified any of these organizations so to know what you're getting into. Have you ever searched them out and written them down on a piece of paper? And the husband said, yes, I've started to see what we've got ourselves into. I've started listing the various organizations that we belong to. And here's the list of them. So the individual for the removal of light blocking certificates took the list and he read it out loud. And here's what he read. Here's the clubs that the people had belonged to, just a few of them. Society for Giving Credit to Paul Revere. Society for Giving More Credit to Paul Revere's horse. Establishment for the Appreciation of Mount Vesuvius. Association for Delinquent Ducks. Organization of Omelet Lovers. Organization of Omelet Lovers with Cheese. Committee to Abolish Violence in War. Bureau for the Detection of Sherlock Holmes. Club for Women Who Yearn to Marry a Man. Club for ex-members of Club for Women Who Yearn to Marry a Man. League for Understanding Crabs, Human and Otherwise. Society for Revealing Secrets About the Elbow. Society Against the Society for Revealing Secrets about the Elbow. Club for Finding a Rhyme for Orange. Organization for Inventing Artificial Air. Society of Loving Hearts, as long as you agree that we are. Institute for Honoring Alexander the Great. Institute for Wondering About Alexandria the Ingrate. Club for Teaching the New Dance Craze called the Froggy Hop Wiggle. And finally, Committee for Returning Bonnie from Over the Ocean. And as the individual for removing light blocking certificates surveyed the list, he looked up, and he looked up with a cheerful, encouraging nod to the middle-aged couple. And he said, I can solve your problem. Or rather, I can show you how you can solve your problem. And I'll tell you how to do it. It's simpler than you think, and yet you may go through enormous emotional upheaval over doing it. It can be done. That's the main thing I want you to know. Now, Mr. and Mrs., if you look around your living room, you will see that all your certificates are held up by thumbtacks. Is that a correct statement? They agreed, yes, that's a correct statement. Now, here's what I want you to do. This is why I'm getting paid for to tell you this. I want you to walk over to any certificate you want, the closest one on the wall. And you reach out your right hand, if you're right-handed, left if you're left-handed. Reach out your hand and you put your fingers around the thumbtack and give a pull on it. Extend your other hand and take the certificate as it falls. Put the certificate in the wastebasket and the thumbtack in your utility closet for future use. You continue this over and over and over. And I will guarantee, if you will persist in this procedure, pretty soon you'll have all the certificates down, and lo and behold, the sunlight will flow through again. And immediately they began to ask him questions about it. And they began to say, what do you think? Do you think I can make it? And this is so radical. We're not used to such a direct, blunt method as this. Could you give us some encouragement for this? So very patiently, over the next few weeks and the months, he would come back and show them how to do it. He even illustrated it. Put out one hand, put the thumbtack under your fingernails, give a slight tug, catch the certificate with your other hand, put the thumbtack in a little box, and put their certificate in the wastebasket. After 2 weeks, they finally found that they could actually do it. They could walk deliberately over, put one hand out, go like that, and the certificate fell off. After months and months, they could finally see the whole room and have it to themselves. Any more comment needed on the little story? It can be done. We're telling you how to do it. But you don't know the resistance you have in you to taking off their certificates, which is simply your own false ideas about how to get along in this world. Why do you complicate the procedure? Why don't you just go ahead and do it so that you can see it can be done by you? Now, there are individual instructors, and they have their place to tell you how to do it, to encourage you to do it. Sooner or later, in great fear and trembling, of course, you're going to have to take your own individual initiative toward that wall, take down one little certificate at a time, and I will guarantee you all of them can be removed. Prove it for yourself.
So you're telling us that as we come into this work with very complicated, trashy minds, we just complicate our approach. It's really very simple. All we have to do is follow directions.
You see the connection between what we talked about last night on the spy story, the poison pen story, the application of it, which is the fact that human beings must induce confusion into their lives in order to hide from themselves in the self-created fog. See how this connects with everything else that we're talking about? Induce confusion into it.
In connection with last night's story about the poison pen letters, and then the certificates today, the poison pen letter is also a certificate that we put on our wall here.
Yeah.
But we don't know, most of us, that we're even joining those clubs or that we're writing ourselves those letters. They're just, we find ourselves encased.
See how the couple, when they were told to simply walk over to the wall and take out a thumbtack, how they must complicate it, must confuse it. See, the mind is very tricky. When the mind senses the directness of truth, of the path, you can walk right toward it if you could do it. It's theory that you can walk toward it. Let's do it in a practical way. But the mind of that couple looked at it, and they sensed they were going to lose their symbols of pleasing people. Well, we take all those down, we're not going to please all these club members, all these people, and they're going to phone us. Your membership is expired. You mean to say you're not joining? You know, the subtle pressures. You get them on the phone and salesmen all day long. They were afraid, weren't they? So to cover up their fear, they induced confusion, and they induced delay into the situation. Delay so they wouldn't have to work now. We're getting to see this trick, that time wrongly used is an ally of remaining in darkness, of remaining in the darkness of that room with all the certificates, and every one of them you know is a pretty lie. Look at the fancy borders they put around the certificate. Look at your name on that, and different colors. And they put a seal, a gold seal on some of them. They try to make you think that it's real, and we fall for it. Let the certificate fall instead.
Pulling down images, which is very painful to see them crack, and pulling off labels that we live by all of our lives.
Correct. Okay, Ellen.
Related to that, I'd like to comment on number 7 on this sheet.
Yes, please.
Should I read it?
Sure, please.
A deluded mind takes the repetition of time events as the eternal state. One reason we don't plunge ourselves into this work is because we don't really believe we're going to die.
Don't believe what?
That we're going to die.
Yes, right. We have a certain false idea of what eternity is, and this is the time mind the time mind tries to deceive you into thinking that it is eternity. And this is one way it does it, is to keep events, madnesses going so that you'll never see that it is time talking instead of eternity. And if time deception can get enough events and insanities going, you won't be able to see through the crack between two thoughts, see? It keeps them going so full, like the freight cars, going so fast you can't see through them. It keeps us deceived. If we can slow down thoughts, we'll be able to see between two freight cars and see that there really is space between them. Then we know that they're simply thoughts, not eternity. Words alone do not penetrate. Spiritual teachings have no way to get through all by themselves when they're in the form of words, ideas, whether written or spoken. Words are in a very elementary way of communication. Someone can tell you how to plant a garden correctly, a vegetable garden correctly. And if you're not interested in planting a vegetable garden, or if you already have your own ways to do it, the words of someone who may be wiser than you will not penetrate. So you'll hear his words, but all the time there is certain resistance in back of them in which you want to do things your way. In spiritual meetings such as this is, I can sit here and talk for weeks and months and years, and you will not learn a thing, you will not change a thing unless my words are matched by something in you. The thing that must be inside of you is a willingness to listen to the facts behind the words. And these facts behind the words are going to, at the start, seem very threatening to you. This will all be unconscious. You won't know that this process I've just described is going inside of you, which is why it's necessary for you to sit here and see what you're thinking about even as I'm talking to you now, so that you can see gradually your fear of the truth develop and your defenses coming up. And you might, if you're very observant, see your resistance to the truth that could save you. You could see it in your physical posture. I see it all the time. I see physical bodies that are going like that, even going backward a little bit to get as much distance as possible between you and me. And I see hard facial expressions, and I see lips that are clamped tightly, and I see hard, hostile eyes, and I see phony smiles trying to kid me that you're receptive and you're nice, and you have just given yourself away. Who do you think you're kidding here? The game of self-kidding extends itself outwardly, and you think you're kidding other people. What a tragic game to play. Therefore, there has to be more than a teacher in this room. There has to be a student who wants to know. There has to be someone who wants to develop something higher than his very angry and self-tormenting defenses. And I'll repeat for the second time, when you are defensive, you're not aware of it. If you were aware of it, you would begin to see your hands go like that. You would see yourself getting critical and hostile. And you'll be bringing up all your memories that are protective, such as a book that said that it is indeed good and necessary for you to become someone high in this world. You must become impressive. And when you hear the opposite of that in this class, you start to get scared because you don't know which way to go. And then if you're lazy, you'll go downhill and you will walk out of here never knowing the pearls you could have walked out of here with. I'm going to tell you a fairly brief story that will illustrate the point that we're talking about. This story happened during medieval times of castles and knights in armor. And there was a prince who one day became the king of the castle, still a very young man. And since he was young, he had many counselors and advisors around him, older men, experienced men. And one day, shortly after the prince had become king, his counselors came to him and said, "Your Majesty, as you know, one of the duties we have is to advise you on the castle grounds themselves. We have to keep the grounds in shape, keep them up to date. We have to make sure that there's an adequate water supply. And so we've come here today to report on that very subject, the fact that as things change, we have to change our water supplies for the castle. And what we'd like to do, Your Majesty, is to set aside a number of people who will be trained just in the task of making sure there's always an abundance of fresh water inside the castle, stored inside the castle. For example, we want to rearrange the barrels so that they're more convenient for people throughout the very broad expanse of the castle. And we want new devices for catching rainwater when it falls. So with your permission, Your Majesty, we'll have a certain little special school set up just for the water supply, which is, as you know, is very important." And the king agreed that, of course, water supply for the castle was essential. But he said, "No, gentlemen, I appreciate your suggestion for training inside the castle, but I have a better idea. You know, when I was a younger man, when I was a prince, I noticed that many traveling craftsmen and experts used to call at the castle and offer us their services. And they would give us their credentials of having traveled all around the countryside, thousands of miles around, and they would bring their services to the castle, whatever it might be. And I would prefer paying them for the services of bringing in the water supply. As a matter of fact, I know of one such group of 10 or 12 craftsmen who are specialists in that. So thank you for your suggestion of building internal help for the water supply, but I think I'll call on the traveling tradesmen, craftsmen," which he did. He called them in and appointed them to the task of improving and maintaining the water supply of the castle. So they came in and they got their money at the start, part of it at least, and they began their work. And the king could look out from the towers and see them both outside the castle walls and inside, and they were indeed digging wells outside and channeling water from a small stream that was at some distance, and they were working inside, putting barrels different places. And he was impressed, and he was quite pleased with his decision to hire the outsiders to do the necessary work. So after several days, their work were done, and they were paid off in full. And he did notice something that surprised him a little bit, which was that they departed immediately after being paid off in full. And he went back to his chambers and was pleased with himself until his counselors finally came to him and said, "Your Majesty, we have a strange situation to report. Do you know that those men, we've investigated, and do you know that those men actually dug 9 out of 10 dry wells and made us think that they were filled with water? And do you know that the barrels that they placed around, which they charged us for, by the way, were inferior barrels that will fall apart after a short time, and they were also placed in the wrong position for water supplies and for fighting fires and so on? Your Majesty, as a matter of fact, I must tell you that our water supply is twice as bad now that the experts have come here. We'd been far better off if we did nothing at all, because not only did they not improve it, but they left it worse than it was before." Well, the king didn't like what he heard, and he pushed it away a little bit, and he said, all right, all right, all right, all right. He brushed them aside. A few months later, the same sort of thing happened again. The counselors came to him and said, you know, the walls of the castle have been neglected for a long time, and as you also know, Your Majesty, this is a very dangerous land. One castle is constantly attacking another, and we could be attacked any day because that's a dangerous world out there. The king agreed to that. And he said, all right, if you really feel it's necessary to build the walls up to rework them against enemy attacks, I certainly will agree to that. However, regardless of our last experience, I insist on calling in outside experts. I've seen their credentials, and I've even talked to one or two other people who have hired them. They say they do good work. So why go to any of the effort of training our own people when we simply call in someone who knows their business and can come in and do it? So again, the king called in the outsiders, and they came in and they worked for 2 or 3 weeks. And they got their money, and they departed immediately after getting their money. And again, the counselors came to the king, and they said, Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's happened again. Those men, instead of putting up brick walls, rock walls, instead of putting up something solid, they used wood. Can you imagine wood withstanding attack from an enemy? And the few places where we had strong walls, they tore them down and said they were going to replace them with stronger walls. They're still lying crumbling there. Those men are charlatans. They took their money and they ran. And we didn't keep close enough check on them. That was our responsibility. But the fact is, Your Majesty, where we were in slight peril from someone being able to penetrate the walls of the castle, we are now in real danger from an enemy coming along and breaking down the walls. They're far weaker than they were before. Again, the king didn't like what he heard, so he brushed them aside and explained it away and said, well, we'll see what happens. And he brushed them aside. This went on for several years, same sort of thing. The counselors advised that they begin their work from the inside. The king insisted on someone from the outside, which, by the way, was very, very expensive. And the king slightly suspected in his mind what the counselors already knew, that they were hit and run. They would come and get their money and do shoddy work and take off. But still it continued to happen. It continued to happen. Until after many, many years, the king was no longer a young king. He had grown a little older, a little more mature, and a little wiser. And about this time, all the people of the castle began to notice something different about him. They noticed, for example, that he wasn't sleeping very well at night, and his counselors noted that the candle in his room was burning far later than it used to. And they noticed that the king had a little different expression on their face, which they couldn't explain, but it was different from the young, frivolous king that they used to know. Finally, one day, the king sent out an announcement to all his counselors in the castle and asked them to come to the throne room where he was seated on his throne. And here they were, all the counselors seated in front of him. And he looked down on them and he said, Gentlemen, you're looking at a very, very foolish man. You're looking at a man with so much egotism and pride who for all these years refused to admit that he was wrong about something. And you know, I've been fighting with this gentleman for all these years, trying to believe that I knew more than everybody else, all the time suffering from it and causing suffering and danger to everyone else in this castle. All the time I claimed that I was their friend, that I was helping them, and all the time I was lying. Gentlemen, you're looking at a very foolish man who now has had at least the honesty to admit it. I know now, and I concede to you that they were charlatans that I hired because I simply didn't have any sense. Gentlemen, you were right from the start. From now on, we're going to train our internal forces here. We're going to learn to do our work for ourselves. We're going to get our own water supply. We're going to build our own walls. And I know now that being free of the traveling charlatans who hit and run, free of them, that we'll be authentically secure here with all the supplies we need. You know what happened to the king to change his mind? Now, you saw the spiritual parallel in that, perhaps. Don't you dare start off in your spiritual quest with trust. Don't you dare. You're going to spell ruination for yourself and everyone else that you know. Start with distrust of your present ways, of your present wisdom. Do you see why? If you say, I'm going to trust, if you start the spiritual quest by saying, I'm going to put trust and faith, what are you putting it in? Your own delusions that you know better and you don't know better. What kind of a result can there be when you trust your own neurosis? When you trust your own conscious follies? Don't you see that mistrust must come first? And don't you see that sooner or later every person who gets on the path and stays on the path is going to have to say to himself, sir, you're a very foolish human being. All that conceit and all that vanity and all that hardness and insisting that you know better. Sooner or later we're going to have to get to the point where we mistrust ourselves and do it in spite of the fear because we don't know what's beyond the mistrust of the false, or the trust of the false. See what happened to the king and see what's going to happen to you. When you no longer look on the outside, you are forced. You are forced to look inside, but you don't know that there's anything there because you've always had your attention outside in the government and your friends and society, which lies to you left and right. That's what you've trusted. And now that you're mistrusting that, where are you going to trust? You don't know yet. All you've known is something out there which is wrong, which is false, but you've faced it and you can't trust yourself yet. You're going to have to go through this period where there's nothing to think about, where there's just a letting go, so that finally something that is not a part of you can tell you where your real trust goes, which will be eternal, which will be absolute, and you'll know it from yourself. You'll feel it, you will live it, you will see your own strength develop because it's coming from up there and coming down to you. You will know it without thought that it's yours. And then all this safety and all this wisdom and all this supply, all the resources that you have, you'll never be concerned with them again because it's endless. It's not depending on your wisdom. It's not depending on the traveling charlatans of a false government, of other people, of friends, of excitements, of entertainments. It's not depending on things that come to an end, but depending on something that is eternal. And now you know it because you know what eternity is. Eternity is to be, not to think. It's to be in a certain situation inside yourself that is always being renewed from on high. And this is not philosophy I'm giving you. It is fact. And some of you suspect it, and I'm telling you that this suspicion is right. Go all the way with it. And someday you will be very quietly and eternally sure of what you are all about and what life is all about. And for the first time, you'll know what God is all about. And in that and in all that is rest.